The Effects of Child Abuse and Neglect is brought to you by Texel, your credit union, with locations in Temple, Belton, and Killeen. Visit us at texel.org.
May the face of the Lord shine on you. May He shower His blessing on all that you do. May you never know anguish, sorrow, or strife. Dwell in the house of the Lord all the days of your life.
Howdy, I'm Sue Ellen Jackson, and this is Aware Central Texas, Effects of Child Abuse and Neglect. You're going to want to stay here with us for a few minutes. We're going to be talking about children and attachment and why that is so important. We are also going to be hearing from Lisa. Lisa is a single parent, and she grew up with every kind of abuse imaginable. And Lisa wants you to hear her story so that maybe you can move away from that curse of family abuse. We're also going to hear later on in the show from Chelsea, who was abandoned by her birth mother when she was 2 years old. I have with me two very special guests today. I have Mr. Ray Aleman, who is a licensed clinical social worker, and I have Mr. Philip Ludwig, who is a licensed professional counselor. Thank y'all for being here.
Thank you.
I was in a training with Aware Central Texas, and we had a therapist come in and talk to us about children and attachment. I was blown away. I had no idea that it was out there and how significant it really is to children when they're first born, and then how we carry that throughout our life. So would you mind telling us, kind of give the street version of what is the definition of children and attachment, and then maybe Philip, you can tell us why that's so significant.
Sure. Attachment theory is the theory that we all require from early on an attachment to a caregiver, a bond with our caregiver that is going to be very important later in life.
By bond, you mean can it be multiple people, or does it have to be one person? And by bond, do you mean physical contact or eye contact?
It's more of an emotional bond.
Really?
Yes.
So that newborn baby is going to connect with mom. That would be attachment?
Right.
What if mom's not there? What if there's somebody else there?
There can be different caregivers. Primarily you think of mom, but possibly mom may not be there, and there can be other caregivers. But it's real important for the emotional bond to be to happen.
Okay.
And that's kind of the start of it, yes.
Right. So a brand new baby would have continuous contact with the same person over and over?
Same person or same people.
Right.
Some primary caregivers, typically mom and dad. Sometimes there's just mom, sometimes there's just dad. Other times there may be some other folks involved as well. But the bond with other people is crucial for what happens in later life in terms of other relationships and their coping skills and just a whole lot of things.
Wow. So from birth, we begin learning how to build those relationships. What if that bond is broken?
Well, and I think it's also important to know when the bond is broken that we're not just talking about an emotional thing, even though that's heavily what attachment theory is about. We're talking about a biological drive that's been put into human beings since the caveman, the bond that was necessary so that children could survive. And so if the biological bond isn't met, as you described, then that's where we start having problems.
Oh my goodness. So if a child is put in a foster situation, or if they're left for hours at a time in a baby bed, you're telling me that affects their development, their neurological development?
Absolutely. It wires in the programs, how we see the world, how we view the world later in life. is often a function of those attachments, whether it is the biological mother, as he indicates. It can be dad, it can be neighbor, it can be friend, it can be whatever. The consistency of the attachment is going to drive later development. It's going to make the difference in if you get a positive outcome or if you're going to kind of live in a negative outcome, if you will.
Wow, that's...
And to add to that, the first 2 years of life are extremely important in terms of brain development. And while that's going on, it kind of contributes to the hardwiring of our brains to where literally patterns become developed and stay with us. And so there's a big connection between what's going on in terms of that bond and in terms of the brain development.
Yeah, I've heard that it's like we have pathways being created in those first couple of years of our lives, and if that situation is not inducive to building those pathways, then in fact there's developmental issues.
That's right. Even the development of empathy, it's been theorized. The theory's a little bit softer, thank goodness now. Once it was theorized, if you didn't get developmentally in those first 2 years of life, that later in life you would have difficulty develop empathy, develop sympathy, developing social interactions with others that entailed taking into the emotional state of the other person. So you can imagine that a person during these 2 years, if they're not hardwired, the good news is you can later address these issues and start to really hardwire those in. And it takes sometimes a professional, sometimes it takes a friend, as I think we'll hear a little bit later on in the story today.
Very interesting. How long does this attachment relationship have to last? I mean, when does it stop mattering? Does it ever stop mattering?
Really, it's a continual process, starting with the primary caregiver and moving on to other relationships and throughout life. It is a continual process, sure.
It just blows my mind. So essentially what you're telling me, if you have a baby and there's not the rocking motion, there's not the kissing and the touching and the bathing and all of that, that it can affect their relationships into adulthood. It can cause them to have developmental delays. What else can it do negatively?
We think about just about the emotion part. When we have problems with our emotions and we hit that magical age of 5 and we start thinking about school, and we start thinking about interacting with our teachers and interacting with our peers, some of the problems develop that are interactional in nature often turn into cognitive or memory kinds or attention kinds of problems in the classroom, so that the children that have this attachment who are still seeking it from the teachers, guess who's taking up most of the teacher's times in ways that may not be so useful for the instruction of the classroom.
Wow. So their social skills are just, it's a mess. Let's hear from Lisa. I asked Lisa if she was nurtured when she was a little child, and this is what she had to say.
The recollection that I have of being nurtured as a child, my family was not very nurturing at all. I didn't remember any nurturing from either my father or my mother. My mom was more the disciplinarian and laid on the couch a lot. I do remember that. She always had a moo-moo, we called it a moo-moo, that she laid in. And I think that my mom was depressed, actually. You know, as I was growing up, now that I say it, I think that she was depressed. I don't think she knew how to handle some of the things that were going on. You know, as I was growing up as a child with my dad, she didn't know about the sexual abuse. But I received a lot of nurturing from Siloam United Methodist Church is who I received a lot of nurturing from. I grew up basically there. I started out probably around 4 or 5 years old, and I think I stayed there till I was about 10. And, you know, I had like second mothers there, you know. Dorothy was one of them, and Josephine. there was just a lot of members of the church that took into me and kind of like adopted me and my family at times. You know, we didn't have a lot of food and stuff that they would bring, you know, when they had their big dinners, that they would bring all the stuff to my house afterwards. You know, my mom had a lot of children. There's 7 of us. And they brought like diapers and coats and stuff to my brothers and to me. They took me out shopping all the time because we didn't have money, because my dad spent most of it on drugs. Or I say all of it on drugs. You know, we were evicted a lot from homes because he didn't pay the bills, or he didn't have, you know, we didn't have hot water, or we didn't, you know, we had to carry the water up the steps because we didn't have hot water and had to boil it on the stove. Some of the things that I remember now, thinking back, you know, how crazy some of the things are. You know, I'm a single mom, and I try to make sure that my kids don't have to go through any of things I went through as a child. You know, as far as the boiling water and stuff like that, you know, I make sure that we keep our bills paid and stuff like that. But, you know, the nurturing, you know, it's really sad to say that I can't remember. My Aunt Sue is one of the biggest people. Her and I don't talk right now. She's very upset with me. When I got sick and had my car accident, she was living in the area of Upper Darby when I lived there. I had her moved down, but after I had the car accident, I wasn't able to take care of her. And I think she got very angry with me. And when I found out her phone number, she said, "How did you get my number?" You know, that was one of the hardest things, because I can remember being 2 years old. She's the only memory that I have of as a little baby climbing a fence to take an egg to her to cook for me, because I would eat eggs from my mom the way she cooked them. That's the only thing my mom said. I used to put them in my pocket and climb the fence. You know, I didn't have time. My mom died with cancer, and I didn't have a lot of time to find out some of my younger childhood stuff, because I didn't know my mom was going to go so quick, or when I was so young. And my aunt was one of the people that did nurture me, and we moved away. And then she moved away, and I didn't see her for years and years until I got older, actually, when we started having family reunions. She was one of the biggest people that did nurture me, you know. I can always remember her hugging and kissing me, you know, and squeezing my cheeks. And it's just some of the things that I remember from her, you know. But as far as my mom goes, I mean, she did hug at times, but it wasn't much at all, you know, and I wished it was a lot more. But me and my mom did, as I got older, after I got taken away from foster care, she did start becoming more nurturing and stuff like that. But after that, that's the time as I got older, she became more nurturing, but not as a little child. You know, I never had her read to me or anything like that. So I guess as a child, that was hard. So it was really hard growing up.
If you are watching this and you remember that things weren't exactly as they should have been when you were little, and you're starting to realize that maybe you had attachment issues when you were little, you need to know that you're putting your children at risk for having lack of attachment. And it's not because you want to be a bad parent or you don't care about your children. It's because you don't know. You're just using the information that you had when you were growing up. I want to encourage you to know that you can rethink that. You can do things differently. You can be the parent that you want to be. And I just hope that you will consider that and give us a call at Aware Central Texas. The number is 254-939-7582, or you can go on our Facebook, or you can go on our website, awarecentraltexas.org. Now back to Lisa.
Okay, I think what was very apparent there. Like she said, there was no nurturing from the beginning, and both parents were basically not invested in the children. Dad was having serious issues with drugs, and mother was kind of distant and kind of maybe the disciplinarian from the couch, like she said. There was a lot of issues that just created problem after problem. The poverty probably that was going on, the inconsistency with life issues and bringing up children, and she is obviously still struggling with those issues today because nothing was really done to help correct what she learned.
Yeah, and I definitely totally agree with that. And you can see where she struggles even in her present telling of this story, where she goes from a voice that, you and I are talking in, and it's like as she regresses back in time, still trying to fix that problem. And clinical questions that I might ask, professional questions I might ask, is she trying to fix that problem now? Is she trying to fix that problem now with the same kind of thinking that one has as a small child? So she got the program when she was small, and then like most children, they say, well, I'm not bad, I'm horrible, and my parents are perfect. And does she beat herself up for that now? Albert Einstein says we can't fix the same problem with the mind that created it. Is she going back and past and reliving that, trying to fix that same problem again with that same kind of childlike thing?
We do that, don't we? Try to solve a problem doing the same thing over and over and over again.
Right. And this is where a professional can be very helpful,
right.
When you get into this level. Whereas for some people, a neighbor, a trusting friend, a pastor, a close relationship with a girlfriend, something that's really healing for that previous experience can kind of get you over that hump.
When you have a situation with a person that doesn't know how to build relationships and they meet that pastor or they have that love, are they able to recover? Is there recovery for that person? Will they ever be able to have the kind of relationships that they want to have? Do they have it in their hard drive, or do they have those skills, and can they be taught? And is there some kind of invisible line that says up to this point you can relearn and you can have relationships, but after this point you no longer are going to be able to have those skills, because we know there's people out there that clearly have no social skills and have no relationship connections. That was a very long question, wasn't it?
But a good one, because it is always possible. It may be much more difficult later in life because we've learned these patterns and they've become part of us, part of our personality, but there's always room for growth. And healthy relationships are extremely important. The earlier on, the better, but if they come along later in life, and it comes through a mentor or a pastor or a counselor or just someone that's there and is emotionally connected and wants to be there for them and invested in the time and energy, it sure can help quite a bit, sure.
What's the likelihood of a person that is not strong with social skills or connectedness? What is the likelihood that they're going to run across somebody that will reach out to them and somehow reach through those barriers? And
it's actually reverse from the question.
Really?
The question, how it turns out in real life is when the person's ready to heal, somebody will appear for them. The unfortunate thing for most people is they don't prepare themselves, that they'll never really get this awareness that this is something that needs to be taken care of, or this is something that is people, when you have an experience, it's just life, isn't it? And this happens, and this is the way that we do things. And once that thought comes into mind, something's not quite right. And as people are watching this tonight, they may say, well, something's just not quite right. It doesn't quite add up. There's something that's missing. And then the question goes out, does something need to heal from early on in life? Once that occurs, it's a lot easier to find somebody in the community, a close friend, a pastor, a counselor, a coach, somebody that can really fill that bill. But first, the motivation has to come from within.
Right.
Am I ready to heal?
Yeah, and that, I would wage to guess that that's a big step. What does culture play into people that have poor attachments? What does our society, how do people navigate through this chaotic world that we live in. What's a typical struggle for someone that has attachments issues?
Sure. Well, the culture these days, of course, is we're in the electronic age, the computer age, and we're moving away from personal relationships more so because we're talking on the computer, we're talking,
Right.
texting and online, and we're certainly involved in communication, but the relationship is not there, I think, like it used to be. So the culture is creating more difficulty for people to be able to connect on an emotional level, I believe.
So what I'm hearing y'all say tells me that if you're someone that doesn't have a lot of skills to build relationships, and now you can get on the internet, does that make you susceptible to be engaged in the dark side of the internet, where there's the porn and the violence and
From old patterns come old patterns.
okay.
So if you're programmed early on in life, people, birds of the same feather flock together, of course.
Right.
So the things that you attract in your life, and this is why it's so important during those primary years of attachment development, when you don't get that, then you start recreating those early situations. So it would be easy to get on the internet and attract that kind of negative, exploitive relationship that doesn't have that deep meaning anyways.
So I think that it's tempting for children that grow up in healthy environments, so possibly children that grow up in less than healthy environments, can be overwhelming. Let's hear from Chelsea. Chelsea is a lovely young woman. She has a family, she has a loving husband, and she has overcome a really interesting childhood.
Well, I was 2.5 and my brother was 5 when we were abandoned by our mother. We were left in a park, and I don't know for what length of time that it was, but eventually we were joined with our grandparents and by some known adult that had taken care of us periodically throughout the days whenever our mother wasn't around. And she was able to look at a piece of information that was with us that my brother had and to call my grandparents to come and pick us up. Unfortunately, being abandoned at such a young age was very difficult for my brother and I. On one hand, my grandparents raised us, were finally able to adopt us through long periods of court battles, trying to get parental rights terminated. And throughout those entire years, that was their retirement time. My grandparents were very good people, but unfortunately, there was a lot of verbal abuse. And I think it was basically because they just didn't know how hard it is to hear those things when you've already been, so compromised by being abandoned by your own mother, someone that should never leave you, should never, kick you to the curb the way basically that I felt. We were told many, many times by our grandparents that, we don't have to raise you, we don't have to let you live here, we don't have to let you be a part of this family if that's, we can send you back to the judge. Looking back on the whole situation, I'm sure it was just their tiredness, their way to deal with something. But unfortunately, words do hurt, and it's very painful to have not only your mother abandon you, but have the potential threat that your grandparents were yet going to abandon you as well. So for the next several years, I really worked on self-introspectiveness through a neighbor that was very caring towards me and my brother. She took us to church. I come to know Jesus. I was very loved by very many people of the church. And I was really able to overcome so many of the trials that I went through as a child. Unfortunately, not everybody's able to do that. It's still a struggle for me today, but I just rely on the Lord's help to get me through day in and day out. And watching myself grow and mature as a Christian has been a huge blessing, not only to me, but for the children that I raise now. And so, you know, I'm very blessed to have a husband that's a very godly man that stands beside me and shows me unconditional love that I've never had before. And I hope, you know, someday that my children will, you know, turn back to me and want to come back to my house and not have those horrible feelings like I've had before.
Chelsea was abandoned by her mom, and she overcame it. If you have abandonment or attachment issues, you can overcome it too. We noticed something between Lisa and Chelsea.
Definitely so. And I think a big difference was the neighbor that she mentioned that did take a kind of a mentoring role for her and was there in her life and was consistent and was attached to her to want to give, and that made a huge difference, I would say. Because with the grandparents, you know, they were doing the best they could, but still she was getting that message that she could be abandoned again. And so there was a lot of threats in her life emotionally, but it seems like, and research shows that if we do develop other relationships early in life that are significant and helpful like that, that a difference can be made. And I think that's the difference between the two ladies that we saw.
Between Lisa and Chelsea, because
Yes.
Lisa's still struggling.
Yes.
I've heard someone say, and y'all can correct me if this is true, that if you grow up in the most horrendous environment and you experience every kind of abuse out there, and you have one person, just one person in your corner, in your world, that you have a 60 to 80% better chance of making it in society. Is that true?
If you can see them.
Right.
If you can see them and you can open your heart to them. That's the real big thing, is that invested heart-to-heart time. If you can see them, then yes.
Gentlemen, I want to thank you so much for being here. I've learned a lot about children and attachment, and I hope y'all have too. And I just want you to know, take this thought with you. There's always hope.
May the face of the Lord shine on you. May He shower His blessing on all that you do. May you never know anguish, sorrow, or strife. Dwell in the house of the Lord all the days of your life.
The Effects of Child Abuse and Neglect is brought to you by Texel, your credit union, with locations in Temple, Belton, and Killeen. Visit us at texel.org.